Hi, I am Loise Henley, and this is my partner in crime, Trine Smith, and we're going to talk about something amazing today. We're going to talk about your inner critic, or what do we use to call our inner critic?
We call it ego.
Ego. Okay,
Yes,
so
our ego.
yeah, and sometimes the ego can be so loud, so we can't hear our inner voice or ourselves think sometimes.
Mm.
So I used to say, if your ego is not your amigo, you're in trouble, struggle.
Yeah. So, Louise, you said that it's kind of going to be an amazing topic, and people are
Mhm.
saying, oh, inner critic, oh, that one. Right. So, Louise and I want to actually celebrate that because the fact that you're actually saying, oh, oh my gosh, we're talking about that is your awareness. So let's just
Mm.
celebrate your awareness of your inner critic and probably the importance for you to really want to change that. We work with so many women that continuously say, the biggest struggle, the biggest thing that's standing in my way is that inner critic. It is that saying that I can't do or I ought to or I should. We should ourselves all the time. And if we can't if we don't know how to, this is really part of Louise and I's journey. Like, we do not know what to do with this inner critic
Mm.
because haven't we all? We're not taught. Like, haven't we all come from a place where we're not taught how to recognize and knowing that we have an inner critic? We're not been taught by our parents, most of us at least. We're not talked about in society, in schools. I wish they had classes about this in school where they talk about how, bullying starts or how, our depression or anxiety, the pressure that we feel, right? And with all of that stuff, we're not taught. You were not taught, Louise.
No, I wasn't. And it was just like, I was taught fake it till you make it. But that inner critic was always there. The ego was always there, try to protect me, keep me safe. And instead of just like fake it till I make it with confidence, I had to figure out how to handle my ego and that inner critic.
Mm.
Um, and that was, I, a long time went by before I discovered how to, to actually do that.
Yeah.
Um, but I finally did.
How did you do it?
How did I do it? Well, I discovered that the more I try to ignore my ego,
Mm.
to not see it, to neglect it, to just like try to park it,
Mm.
the louder it became.
Mm.
But when I began to acknowledge it, listen to it, not act on it, but listen to it. And if it says, oh, you can't do that, you're not good enough, you don't have time, you don't know how to do it, you're not a teacher, you're not an expert, then I began to say, okay, I can hear what you're saying. And I spoke out loud. So my kids thought I was nuts when I was talking out loud to my ego. But it helps my brain to slow down the voice of the inner critic and not concentrate on it so much. So I just began to acknowledge it, say, I can hear what you're saying to me. I know you're trying to protect me,
Mm.
but I choose something differently right now because
Mm.
I want to. And because I could feel it in my heart, this would be the right choice for me.
Mm.
And when I began to speak to my ego and acknowledge it, the volume turned down.
Yeah, the volume of the ego turned down. So what would you do instead? So a lot of times, we can kind of catch that, the nagging, oh, you can't do that, or this is not the time for that, or you don't have enough education or not enough wisdom, and or you're really not worth it, or whatever the ego is kind of telling us. Like, what do you do next? I mean, you recognize that voice, and then what?
And then I acted on the choice I made in that moment.
For
And
example.
for example, that I am not good enough to start my own business and become an entrepreneur. But I could feel it in my heart, and that I could not do it. So even though my ego was just like yelling, "Oh, you are a single mom, you need a paycheck, you need your paycheck in 30 days, where should the money come from? You will never have enough money, you're not good enough, people won't like you." The ego was just like yapping away, and I acted on it in a way that I wrote my resignation and I handed in the next day. So when you choose something else, you should remember that you chose it and chose something different, and then act on it.
I love that. So instead of kind of overanalyzing or evaluating it, it's really just taking that step towards something different.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
and you can feel inside, when you silence your ego, what's right for you. And in the beginning, I couldn't even feel what was right for me. So it was, I had to practice that as well. So it's just like, do I turn left? Do I turn right? Do I like milk? Do
Yeah.
I drink water? Do I, all the time, so I could feel my decision in my stomach. So it's just like an exercise that goes hand in hand with what you want.
Yeah. So we get to our inner alignment or inner truth, really, or inner
When you
knowing,
turn it
voice of our,
down, yeah.
voice of our true self. Because the you inside you, the true self, is very silent, right? Or not silent. It's very soft
Soft.
spoken. It can get loud if we practice toning or turning down the volume of the ego a lot, so we can hear it more loudly. But in the beginning, it is kind of that soft, gentle nudging of kind of knowing what's right for us in the moment. But then we come up with all those excuses. It's really just based on ego fear.
Because when you choose something else than you're normally doing or choosing, it can be scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all the excuses, well, I can't make it today. Tomorrow I'll do it. It's just like if we're going on a diet or something like that. Well, tomorrow is the best day. Oh, I'm going on to a birthday party on Saturday, so Monday I will begin.
Yeah.
So all these excuses and self-sabotage patterns begin to come up. But you
Yeah.
have to listen and remembering why you chose something differently.
Yeah. And then feel the momentum of that, right? Because we're here to celebrate everybody out there that are taking and making those steps in their lives. If you have recognized that the last week that you've taken different steps than what your ego is kind of saying you can't do, like, let's just celebrate that for a moment.
It's amazing.
Yes, because you're creating momentum in your life. There's this flow that happens when you start stepping into your true self and your path and your purpose, instead of you allowing yourself the momentum of holding yourself back and getting back into ego safety, where ego wants to kind of keep you stagnant and not moving on. For me, it was really important to recognize the fact that just that I even had this inner critic, because growing up, I thought it was who I was, right? Like, I thought that was me. I have one voice inside of my head, and any other voices would be like, I'm like, have some kind of, diagnosis, like something mental be wrong with me, right? But there's actually like several parts of ourself in a sense. And really more of the fear prone and the love prone voice. One of them we call ego. We call that's really based on our thoughts and our emotions and stuff. And when I understood that that was separate from my true self, like my inner knowing, the one that I kind of knew where I was going in life and what I really wanted and who I want to work with and who I want to serve in life and who I am as a person. But then ego kind of told me a different story at times. It was very confusing because it kind of morphed into one. They exist at the same time. And I think this is where people get really, really confused, is that I kind of know the truth about myself, but then this part of the ego happens at the same time. So it's kind of like a plus minus, and it ends up kind of in a zero. And then you are just confused and you feel lost and you feel stuck. But for me, when I learned to kind of separate that and say, okay, the part of ego, like when it is my amigo, it's kind of like it can exist at the same time, but I don't have to listen to it. I can acknowledge it and label it and put shine light on it and say, okay, I acknowledge you, you're there. But if I then choose to do something different in that moment, then the volume turns down on ego, because we're not trying to push it away and create more resistance, but we're really allowing ourselves to just practice following our inner voice and our inner intuition. And I mean, that was just like the most mind-blowing moment in my life when I recognized that it was kind of a separate part of me. It's still who I am, it's still part of my human experience, but I don't have to necessarily listen to that part. There's another part too that is even more true, that can still take the fear under my arms and just do it anyway. Isn't it like so cool? I mean, life is just like super amazing. And I think this is why we're really trying to like emphasize this inner critic, like how it is really more of a form of celebration, a celebration that, of course, we have our inner critic, but it doesn't have to lead your life. It doesn't have to control your life. It doesn't have to be the leading force in your life, right?
Right. And everything that your ego is saying, you're not good enough, you can't do that, you're not pretty enough, you weigh too much. That is just a thought pattern. That's just a story. And when you become really aware of it's just a story, you can change that story. You can choose something differently. You have a new chance, a clean slate every day, every hour, every minute, every second.
Yeah.
So each day, each second, you have a new choice to make. Do you want to keep telling yourself the old stories, or would you like to change them?
Yeah. And the cool part is that you get to choose what you want to change it to.
Exactly. But I can remember when I was stuck in my stories, and I didn't know it was stories. I didn't know that I had the ability to change them or to choose something differently or to rewrite them. And when I had to learn to become aware of awareness. And when I learned that, it was just like everything in my life, every thought, every habit, every pattern, everything was just like, I put a question mark on it.
Yeah.
And began to ask myself questions.
Yes. Right. Because at that point, it's like, what is really ego and what is really part of what I want it to be, right? Because now we can kind of rewrite or almost anything. We can break down any story that doesn't serve us anymore and kind of create a new story. And as soon as we become aware of something that doesn't work, because sometimes we continue to do stuff that doesn't work for us because we're not yet aware of it. But as soon as we become aware of it, we're like, wait a minute, why have I been doing this since, my mom told me I was supposed to do this, or or my friends have told me, our society tells us that we're supposed to think and do a certain thing because that's just what you're supposed to do. And you're like, wait a minute, why am I still doing that? Like,
exactly. And have you ever experienced that? I know you have kids, Trina. So sometimes you catch yourself in, oh, I'm sounding like my mom.
yes.
Have you ever tried?
Oh, I don't like those moments. I'm doing the thing that I swore I would never do to my own kids.
Yeah. And when you have that moment where you can hear your mom, you have a choice. Yeah. Right there in that moment, you have a choice to redefine, rewrite the story, to act differently. And it's okay to say to our kids, sorry, I use Control-Alt-Delete. So my kids are used to that expression. So they know when I say Control-Alt-Delete, when I talk to them, I need a minute to rephrase.
Yeah.
And then I can become the mom I really want to and handle things or situations or something like that the way I truly want to.
Yeah. And I think that's the most mind-blowing, knowing about ego is mind-blowing, but I think the part where you actually start restructuring or reconstructing who you want to be or why you're here in life and what kind of mom do I want to be? What kind of person do I want to be? Like all of a sudden you have the total freedom and the total liberty to choose who you want to be. And it's just a matter of practicing that. And it can be challenging for a lot of women to actually get off the what I do not want train onto the, well, what do I want? Do I have the permission to? Am I even allowed to think like that? I have a family who's going to be affected by the fact if I all of a sudden change how I show up. Then
exactly.
What?
Exactly. And at that point, sometimes I felt very alone because I didn't know anybody else that was in that transition or in that space of growth and self-awareness. And I was just looking everywhere for people that could relate to my thoughts and my growth. And I know you did as well, Trina, felt alone at some point. And that's part of why we started to work together to create that community, that sisterhood, that safe space where we can cheer each other up or just wait, I've been there, I know what to do, and give you the shortcuts.
Yes.
And that's really amazing.
Yes, it's so impactful that we're able to give that to people, really create that for people. The women that we work with, they feel the same way. They feel alone. They feel wrong. They feel, how do I get from here? Because nobody else really understands what I'm talking about.
Exactly. And I think that something that resonated with me the last session we had with some of our members was that when they felt alone, they feel sometimes not empowered.
Yeah.
And they begin to question themselves and doubts come in, and then the critic comes back.
Oh, absolutely. Now there's a lot of judgment coming, a lot of judgment. And that's when you lean into kind of the trust, or you just take those steps, right? So if you find yourself in that moment where you're I know I'm in a position where I need to step outside of this, and I've kind of worked on my inner critic, but I don't know what the next step is. Just take a step that is not aligned with your inner critic.
Yeah.
Take a step into what you need. It can just even be switching up like your physical activities, or it can be having a different habit at work, or taking a little bit of extra breaks for yourself where you just kind of sit still and you can feel your body and you connect with your breathing. It can be almost anything that is in your best interest, because as soon as we kind of break the habit of, beating ourselves up, we are creating new momentum. And then you're truly going to be able to step into that, I call it playground, where you kind of play with different ways of showing up differently. Like you create your own like swing and slide, like what color it's going to be and what the experience is going to be. And even though that you're afraid of slides and you're afraid of the swing or the seesaw, it's like you can make it as safe as possible. And I hope you kind of can follow the analogy with this, but it's almost like if I've always told myself that I can't do something, or I'm never going to get out of this job, or I'm never going to be having the company that I always wanted, or I'm never going to be that kind of mother that I see my friend is or someone else. Well, if you take steps towards those behaviors, and you're going to start embodying, feeling the confidence, or taking the step with the fear and doing it anyway, and you may never have done that before. I mean, all of that stuff creates more of who you are and gets closer to what you really want to do. So that's that playground that you get to test the nuances in your language, in the way you talk, in the way you show up. And with that practice, I mean, because Loise and I, we've been there. Like we're talking about all the steps that we have gone through, where we felt all of that. And with the practice and the self-talk and the change and catching our ego and doing something different, the inner critic, right, just gets turned down, and there's peace, and there's more joy, and there's a lot more fun, and there's celebration.
And you will come to a point when that's the critic again, and you will be able to laugh of it.
Yes.
Because it's just like, I know that I have a choice to listen to it or choose something differently, and I know how to turn the volume down.
It's so empowering. It is so empowering. Just what you just said, to just catch it, and laugh of it, and not take it so seriously, because it's not really who we are, and then choose something different. I mean, who does not want that? It's amazing. This is such a great, this is one of our top topics to talk about, right, Loise?
Yeah, I love to talk about ego, but I love to talk about ego because I've passed it.
Yeah.
I passed that step in my growth.
Yeah.
And I know how to handle it.
Yeah.
Because before I learned that, I hated ego.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was just, I used to call it the red dog and the white dog on each shoulder. And sometimes they could like be really loud in their discussion.
No, absolutely. And I know you guys that women are listening, you might be in that place where you just do not like even talking about the inner critic, because it just really got a huge grip on you. But let us just offer that there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I know that light is already there for you. Otherwise, you would not be craving this and wanting this. Like, you're so much closer than you actually think, because most people are not aware of it. They may be aware of the inner critic, but they don't know how, they don't have the curiosity and the longing to try to get rid of it. They just integrate it into their personality and use it as the best force out there, and they're not necessarily going to get what they want.
And just try it out. Just try the exercise that speaks, and you feel a little dumb in the beginning, a little weird. But then go to the bathroom. You can do it in there just all by yourself.
Oh yeah.
And talk to your inner critic and talk to your
Yes.
ego. It's just like, I can hear what you're saying.
Yes.
But I choose something differently
Yes.
right now.
Yeah.
And practice it. Try it out for 2 weeks. See how it will change your everyday life and your well-being.
Yeah. So we hope you found this helpful. We'll be back with more amazing topics. But this one is super important to us, and we really appreciate you being here with us. And
thank you for watching.
Thank you for watching.